for this exciting and timely presentation. Before we get started, I just want to make a quick note that this session is being recorded. So if you'd like to refer back to it later or share it with colleagues, you'll be able to do so. We also encourage your participation throughout the session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the empty questions box, and we'll be sure to leave time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Lori Bernardi. Dr. Bernardi is here to present a hot topic that's gaining attention across the field of school-based occupational therapy, which is called From Caseload to Workload, Redefining OT Practices with MTSS. Redefine your role, stress less, and support all students. In this presentation, Dr. Bernardi will explore how OTs, as specialized instructional support personnel, can shift from a traditional caseload model to a more collaborative and proactive workload approach, one that aligns with the Every Student Succeeds Act and all students, not just those with IEPs. She'll share actionable strategies to help you build buy-in with the school staff and administration, communicate OT's broader role, and take meaningful steps toward integrating OT into a multi-tiered systems of support framework. We're thrilled to have her with us today to guide this important conversation. Dr. Bernardi, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. Sorry about that, everybody. So I want to thank you guys all for taking the time out in your busy schedules to join me tonight. As Carrie said, my name is Lori Bernardi. I've been a school-based OT for 23 years. I'm also an adjunct professor with BAPAC and received both my master's and doctorate there as well. This is my 5th year in the Rocky Hill Public Schools in Connecticut, and this presentation is on a hot topic in our profession, moving from the caseload to workload model and how to utilize the MTSS process. So I'm going to talk about both caseload and workload models, and then I'm going to discuss how we are implementing this in our district. And I'm hoping that you can leave today with some resources to empower you to make the change. So just a short background for you. I began this journey from caseload to workload when I joined in Rocky Hill. And I figured it was a perfect time to do this since the caseload had 95 plus students on IEPs, and there were additional 30 students with assistive technology service. And I was traveling between 5 buildings. I also had the support of the most amazing CODA, Stephanie, for 2.5 days. And I ended up consulting with some of my OT colleagues that were already implementing this workload model before I got started, because as you can imagine, I was really overwhelmed. I was stressed out, and between the traveling and everything, I had a really hard time keeping myself organized. So I was really motivated to do this. So now I'm in my 5th year. We still have work to do, but each year we keep setting new goals for what we want to accomplish. And currently we have 45 students who are on IEPs that are mostly indirect. We support an autism, a life skills behavior program, and 6 sections of a preschool program, both AM and PM, in addition to grades K through 3. So when we started working together, Stephanie and I had many conversations on how to ensure that our interventions were benefiting our students, and not just in our sessions, but in all aspects of their day. So thankfully, we were both on the same page, because it is essential that everyone involved has a voice in this process. Carrie, next slide, please. Thank you. So the learning objectives today are that I hope you will be able to differentiate between the caseload and workload models, explain how the workload aligns with MTSS, identify strategies to transition to a workload model, develop an action plan to support workload practices, and then advocate for workload practices with your administration. So why change? Well, I don't know about your experiences, but we have seen an increase in student needs in our district. So along with the limited time and high caseload numbers, that equals high demands. So a workload model encourages capacity building in your district and improves school processes when you can be a part of developing resources for your school community. And also under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, which is a federal general education legislation from 2015, we are considered specialized instructional support personnel. Under IDEA, which is special education, we are considered related service providers. The ESSA OT Advocacy Network created a great document called Occupational Therapy's Role as SISPs under ESSA. And in this document, it says that ESSA gives the states the responsibility to create and carry out plans that support the success of all students. And a major part of ESSA is encouraging students to use a multi-tiered system of support model, which is that MTSS. And that includes both school-wide universal Tier 1 supports and targeted Tier 2 strategies. And the goal of these approaches is to promote students' participation and overall well-being throughout the school day. The document also goes on to say that ESSA provides explicit support for OT practitioners as SISPs to implement these health promotion prevention efforts and the creation of positive environments for learning. And some of those environments can include in the classroom, sensory processing for self-regulation, stress reduction activities, in the cafeteria, being a good friend, having meaningful conversations, at recess, enjoying active play and teamwork, after school leisure activities, engaging in hobbies. So this really opens up and reinforces our entire scope of practice. And I don't know about you, but I was really tired of being referred to as the handwriting teachers or sensory people. And the workload approach aligns with ESSA, MTSS, and inclusive practices. Okay, caseload model, what is it? So a caseload model focuses on the number of students who are on IEPs receiving direct or indirect services. We're related service providers. It falls under a medical model. And this model is more of a reactive approach that's driven by referrals to special education. And the caseload model really limits the OT practitioner's ability to support the entire school community. So what are some challenges that we face using a caseload model? The high referral rates that lead to high numbers of evaluations. That can be overwhelming, and trying to find the time to complete all of the evals, write up reports, and attend all the meetings. It also limits time for collaboration. It limits time for preventative interventions, and it limits time to be able to make changes to systemic supports in the classroom. The caseload model lends to an inequitable access to the OTP's expertise as well. It also limits our scope of practice and keeps us in that handwriting sensory needs category. We're unable to provide that equitable access and participation for students who are struggling academically that may have some underlying issues other than handwriting or sensory needs and that are on IEPs. Workload model, what is that? So in a workload model, every single professional responsibility is accounted for. It's an educational model. It focuses on the least restrictive environment and inclusive participation in the general education setting. It looks more like indirect services, providing consultation, trainings, co-teaching, coaching interventions in a contextual environment of the classroom or school. This approach is proactive, it's collaborative, student-centered, and it supports all students. So what are some benefits of using a workload approach? So as I mentioned before, using this model provides equitable access to the OTP's expertise. It also aligns with IDEA and ESSA. And this approach will hopefully reduce provider burnout and feelings of being overwhelmed. It's going to lead to a reduction in referrals, which means less evaluations. And the OTP can focus on that early intervention model that can lead to prevention. It also strengthens relationships with school staff and ultimately can produce better student outcomes of increased participation and less time away from instruction. Okay, so what is MTSS? Many of you may already know what this is, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. So MTSS is the multi-tiered systems of support. formerly known as response to intervention or RTI, or scientific research-based interventions or SRBI. Schools use this to identify students at risk for delays in reading, math, and behavior. MTSS is a framework. It provides support to all students, and it focuses on prevention, early intervention, and differentiated instruction in the smaller setting. It utilizes a universal design for learning, for behavior, academics, and health promotion. And as you can see, there are 3 tiers in this pyramid here. Tier 1 are those universal supports, and it includes all students in the school. Tier 2 is a more targeted approach for small groups, and Tier 3 is more intensive, which includes just a few students with more complex needs. OT's role in MTSS. Okay, so this is where we can shine. I really love this infographic, and I took this from the Connecticut OT guidelines because it helps us visualize what MTSS can really look like outside of that pyramid we just saw. So under the umbrella at all tiers, we are providing that continuum of programming, supporting and empowering teachers. We're using our coaching skills, we're building relationships and capacity building. The capacity building area is essential for long-term success within this model and switching from the caseload to workload. And all tiers are within the general ed setting and mostly implemented by the teachers and classroom staff. I'm going to get more into each tier later, but for now, think of Tier 1 universal support strategies as adaptations that are at the classroom or building level where every student can access. This can include whole class screenings, co-teaching in the classroom. This is where the relationship process begins, and we need to make those connections with the teachers to have their support in helping to facilitate this process. Tier 2, small groups, teacher coaching and co-teaching. This could be in the classroom, it could be in the cafeteria, it could be recess. There are so many places that these small groups can happen. And Tier 3 is more individualized in the way of accommodations, could be IEP based. And at this tier though, the student still doesn't require the support of a skilled OTP, but can benefit from our expertise in providing strategies or accommodations for a specific student. All right, so let's connect the workload model to MTSS. So what does that mean to have the OT contribute fully in each of the tiers? This means that we're involved and included in their building MTSS process. We're invited to the MTSS grade level meetings to discuss students who are being brought up for MTSS support. It also means that we're gathering and creating a place for teachers to access strategies and tools such as a Google Classroom. And in order to attend these meetings, there needs to be a scheduled time in the OTP's week to do this. So this moves beyond IEP-driven services and provides that early intervention approach that can reduce a referral to special education or a referral for an OT eval. Some students on IEPs are brought up for MTSS, and it also expands our scope of practice. You know, why not talk about how sleep impacts participation, or talk about trauma-informed practices, or the importance of leisure skills, or how to facilitate play, executive functioning skills, environmental modifications. Because of how OTs approach barriers from a holistic lens, we understand that all of these things can impact a student's availability for learning. So in our district, all students must go through the MTSS process before a referral can be made to OT. And of course, there are exceptions of a parent-driven referral or a birth to 3 referral. But even those, I mostly do observations to start. You know, students don't just get an evaluation or services just based on an autism diagnosis or being a pre-K student that came in from birth to 3. The focus in school is on accessing the curriculum and participation in the school environment. So looking at what is impacting the student's participation can help determine if a student just needs an accommodation or modification to participate. And as you can see, when this is working smoothly, it can potentially reduce the intensive needs for services over time. So enhancing MTSS using neurodiversity affirming practices. This is part of the capacity building area, and I cannot stress the importance of this enough. This means creating an inclusive school culture and opening up dialogue on how your school can do this. We need to accept differences in how students think and learn, and we need to value neurodivergent students for who they are. The focus is on changing the environment versus changing the student. Everyone, wants that kid out of the classroom for a while, but what if we change the perspective of the teacher? And what if we change the way instruction was delivered, or created visuals to support instruction? Or what if we just dimmed the lights and added some carpeting, or provided more of the UDL opportunities? Can you imagine the availability for learning that students could achieve if the environment were set up with the tools that they need to be successful all day? For a long time, we have been asked to change the student to fit the environment, give them a fidget, take them out of the classroom, give them a seat cushion, as if that was like a magic formula. But you know what? Why not let them stim? Why not let them have a moment to let out their energy? Because that is their self-regulation. And I'm also not just talking about students with autism, but all neurodiverse learners. How many neurodiverse students are melting down before lunch because they're hungry, or afternoon? I know teachers do too. I know I'm tired in the afternoon. Some schools expect new learning to happen by having science and social studies at the end of the day. Sometimes breakfast and snack are really close together, and then there's a long stretch until lunchtime. Schools are accommodating teacher and grade level scheduling and not necessarily accounting for student needs when scheduling. But, what if we could make those changes? We've seen a decrease in sensory referrals since we began this process. More of our classrooms have a calm corner where students can go to color, draw, do puzzles, or just be. All of our classrooms have alternative seating options. Some classrooms are great with the environmental piece of lighting and decreasing visual stimuli. If we're using those targeted supports at each of the tiers, we can help reinforce that being neurodiverse is not bad or annoying. And then in turn, we're also impacting mental health by normalizing this stereotype. When children receive that reinforcement that their behavior is considered bad, or they end up with a label of being a troublemaker, this can become their identity over time because they had received attention for it. And we all know that negative attention is still attention. So building on their strengths and interests and teaching students to self-advocate for what they need, and then recognizing how they learn best, is a huge indicator of success later in life. So integrated services for students with high intensity needs. So what does that look like? So these could be students who require adult support to participate all day, or students who need more modifications or accommodations to access their day. This could be medically fragile students, autistic students, students with severe behavior challenges, or really any neurodiverse student in a classroom that doesn't have adult support but requires a teacher's attention at all times. As we know, many of these students learn and acquire skills differently from other students. So for instance, a student might not be available for learning at the scheduled OT time on Tuesday from 10:30 to 11. And maybe they can complete the activity or skill in the therapy room, but can they do it in their gen ed environment? I've had students who won't complete skills anywhere but our room. And I had a student who wouldn't do anything for me because Stephanie was his provider most of the time. And I actually did not believe her when she said one day that he had met all of his objectives because all he did for me was scream and try to elope. And then I watched one of her sessions and I was completely floored by his performance. However, teaching those rote skills without meaning and context isn't really benefiting these students. If they are so rigid, they won't do them under any other circumstances. Even at the high school level, the PT, the special ed teacher, and myself, we collaborated to create a business for the students in the life skills class. So these are students who spend all of their time or most of their time in the classroom, in that classroom, and they only go out maybe for specials, maybe just for lunch. So we created bath bombs and soaps with them. We partnered with business students in the high school to create a website, the art students to create a logo. Peers could come in and help when we were making them. And the life skills students delivered the items around the school. And then this opened up an opportunity for the life skills students to be a part of that high school community. So shifting to that indirect service model and coaching the teacher and staff within the classroom provides a more meaningful contextual application of the skills. And for our high needs students, this is what we are doing. We provide and oversee the embedded programming, but the classroom teacher and staff carry it over every day. And this is that varied service delivery that's easier to provide in a workload model. Thank you, Carrie, sorry. So the impact that the workload model has on capacity building. So when teachers are empowered, they're more willing to try new things and then allow us to be a part of their classroom. They will use the strategies in the classroom all of the time with all of their students, creating a much broader impact. When we're part of school-wide initiatives, when we present professional development to staff or incorporate OT aspects into school-wide initiatives, this is building knowledge translation to the wider school community and setting the stage for future benefits and not just a one-time episode. And as we know, students with high intensity needs benefit when everyone around them is using consistent strategies all throughout the day. So under MTSS and the workload model, OTs are active in supporting all students, and this includes high intensity needs students in inclusive settings. And then we have more time to spend in the gen ed environments and less time in isolated therapy sessions. But be careful because this does have its consequences. We've done a really good job with this in our building so far. And now they're including OT and PT, and yes, the PT does some of this as well, in all of our the teacher community activities. We were never invited to these PD offerings or staff meetings. You know, we were those forgotten ones on the other side of the building with the pencil grippers and a trampoline. In other buildings in our district, the OTs and PTs do not participate as much as we do. And I just want to say that our building right now is the only one that's initiating this model. And last year, we received feedback from the state that our building has better student outcomes, less referrals to special ed, and the students spend more time in gen ed than any other building in our district. So that was really exciting to hear. So this slide, this is an ideal time allocation vision for the workload model. This is taken from my good friend and colleague in Connecticut, Melissa Olson. You can also find this in last month's OT Practice magazine. She did her OT capstone on this topic, and in her research, she determined that this was the perfect vision of allocation of time if you are implementing a workload model. And as you can see here, 19% is spent doing compliance, which is the state and federal law requirements like Medicaid building, completing IEP documentation, attending meetings. The other highest amount at 17.9% of your time should be spent on district initiatives like social emotional learning, MTSS, PBIS, whatever your building is doing. And only 7.1% of an OT's time should be spent providing direct services to students. Evals are also 7.1% of your time. Now this is the ideal and it's something to work towards. We are not there yet either, but we're getting close. If we didn't have all the special programs moved to our building this year, and we didn't inherit IEPs from another OT who uses a caseload model, we would be much closer to this. So how do you do it? Step one is to reflect on your current practice and conduct a time study. I have resources for a time study at the end of this PowerPoint, and it will be shared with you as well. You're going to map all of your tasks beyond your direct service time. You're going to map tasks doing anything. Every 15 minutes, you're going to write down what you're doing, whether it's time spent looking up resources for teachers or time spent calling parents or outside providers, prep time, documentation time. It's time spent doing every single part of the workload aspects of each student on an IEP or 504 plan. And then step 3 and 4 sort of go together, collaborating with your administrators and educating them on what OTs can do and how we can be a part of the larger school community. And then step 5, start small, just focus on maybe tier 1 or tier 2 initiatives. So this is where I'm going to talk more about our process. And I realize that this may not be what it looks like for everyone. It is not a one-size-fits-all process. But my hope is that you can learn from what we implemented and use some of the resources and strategies at the end of this PowerPoint and fit them into your district. The first thing we did was collaboration strategies. We had to start here because the relationship with OTs and teachers wasn't great when I started. So we set aside time to collaborate with the preschool teachers, the resource teachers, and the teachers in the specialized programs. We asked to be invited to the MTSS meetings, and then we met with the MTSS coordinator, and we revamped the paperwork for ease of access, and then it also aligned better with their process. The previous method was reported by the teachers to be confusing and difficult to fill out. So this was a really important step in reducing those referrals to OT. And so she created it, they do it in this Google Sheet. And then we receive that, it's shared with us after the MTSS meeting, and then we can fill that out with our suggestions for the teacher. And this encourages collaboration and that it is a team effort and the teacher's not alone. And previous feedback was that they would be given a suggestion but not talk to the OT about it. And the previous paperwork actually said not to contact the OT at Tier 1, so we really needed to work on building those relationships. So we created a Google Classroom with Tier 1 supports for teachers to access anytime. We created a mindful motor movements classroom, and we did a PD on that. And in the classroom has regulation activities, fine motor and visual motor activities, and some research even. And then we partnered with teachers to co-teach lessons during their letter formation time. We demonstrated Core Out the Door, which is a school moves, and that is also linked later on in the PowerPoint, and some other movement activities that gives the teachers more bang for their buck in terms of regulation, because just putting on any old movement video where you may see students not participating because it's too difficult, you know, that was a problem. We provided PD on how to implement the programming we put together. Stephanie does weekly groups in all the pre-K sections, and then we both tackle K in first grade classrooms. We focus on that early intervention piece because we know that's where we can have the biggest impact. And then we also collaborated closely with our KIP program, which is our autism program, and we do a weekly group in there, and we model activities for them to carry over in the classroom. And oftentimes the speech pathologist joins us, and even peers joined to make this a more inclusive model, and we also incorporate their AAC devices. Very next slide, thank you. So some examples of Tier 1 UDL supports. So under the classroom and environmental modifications, we're looking at the lighting, the walls, mobility spaces, regulation spaces. This reinforces that inclusive neuro-affirming classroom. The environment's an area that teachers don't always think about having an impact on students' ability to focus and attend. So just changing the lighting or decluttering the walls, which the teachers actually love this suggestion, can be so helpful in providing a calm space in the classroom. And then, you know, even just providing increased access for someone with mobility issues. And then supporting neurodiverse learners. You know, visual communication support should be everywhere. One of our kindergarten teachers set up an AAC enlarged poster for students to go point at what they need if they're unable to verbalize in the moment. We use a lot of card visuals, break cards, visual schedules, inclusive communication supports, trauma-informed classroom supports, sensory inclusive environments, and mental health promotion, all at the Tier 1 universal level. And then teacher coaching on routines and transitions. We provide in-services or PD that promotes inclusive participation. You can even do handouts or a weekly or monthly newsletter, and this is one of our goals for the future. And then the school-wide programs, there's a mindfulness one. We do our mindful motor movements. We hope to do in the future the Every Moment Counts, either the Comfortable Cafeteria program or Refreshing Recess. That's one of our continued goals. And then we're also embedded into the supportive peer play group within the KIP classroom. So some Tier 2 supports, some examples of that more targeted. And all of this is still on the general education level. But these are more small group supports, intervention strategies, maybe for visual or fine motor skills. We provide fine motor boxes to each of the classrooms. We even provide some visual activities to promote tracking and scanning to impact reading. We do some sensory lifestyle plans, and we've placed, I can't take credit for that, it's also Stephanie, in the hallway, all of the hallways have these motor movement activity posters. And then we teach the school moves in every single classroom that core out the door. And I don't know if anyone is familiar with school moves, but this is great because this was a great example because there's a video that goes along with it, and Deb M. Wilson is the one who created School Moves, and she created this video and we had shared it out to the teachers. And then recently a teacher said to me, that video is not working anymore. Do you know what happened? Can you reshare it? And I'm like, oh, all right. So I went and checked and it wasn't there anymore. So I contacted Deb Wilson and she made it available on YouTube for us. So it's back up and running. But I was really excited that the teachers came to me because that just reinforced that they are using the things that we have put together for them and have instructed them on. We're always collecting data and monitoring progress at every single one of the tier levels. This is a really important step because this is what you're going to want to use to show your administrators the classroom and participation impact. We also have kindergarten. We had a kindergarten para who redid a data sheet that I created and it was amazing. So I'm using this with other students too, and she was really excited about it. Many of our paraprofessionals are in school and they have really great ideas to add to the process. And then taking ownership increases that implementation, and this can be a really positive result of the collaboration process. And this classroom also recently sent me a data sheet. They're already starting a tier 1, keeping track of data for a student. So now they're just implementing that. And this is that capacity building I've been talking about. They already have the tools and they can get started without us. So some examples of some tier 3 intensive supports. These are more individualized. So I don't use sensory diets anymore. I call them sensory lifestyle plans because it is a lifestyle. And so sensory needs can be addressed obviously at any of the tiers, but in order to do a more individualized sensory lifestyle plan, I will do a contextual observational assessment and sometimes a complete and informal assessment to determine if maybe we can do some UDL accommodations or implement a sensory lifestyle plan that the teacher carries over, or if it requires a more detailed lens of the OT and we do a more formal evaluation. And at this stage too, I might be recommending more AT apps that are not available to everyone. And this is how I addressed the 30 students on the AT caseload when I began at Rocky Hill. So since COVID, everyone has a Chromebook now and has access to alternative modes of writing like speech to text or keyboarding. And even teachers are delivering instruction using Kami, OrbitNote, slides, etc. So these have all become universal. And it really is the team's responsibility to review AT and ensure access and implementation across all settings for students who need it. It does not require a skilled OT or an AT certified person all of the time. However, there are sometimes issues that come up that need to be addressed at this level. But again, once everyone is trained, it may not require an ongoing service. So some examples of paid subscriptions that can be purchased individually. They are a little pricey, so they are more individualized for students, like Google Math, the Google Math extension Equatio, or now ModMath is coming out with a new one. There's Bookshare, Learning Ally. But after all of the UDL options are exhausted, these may be considered. And then once the teachers and the students are trained, they don't necessarily need the ongoing support of an OT or AT professional. But there is continued collaboration at this point still with the MTSS teams, and ongoing data collection is happening at all tiers that the teachers are collecting and sharing with us. Okay, next slide, Carrie, please. So the next thing is advocate. You need to share how workload improves student outcomes. This is a really important piece as well. Use the data, keep the data. The data is essential, and administration loves data. You can show how this has led to fewer referrals, which is what we did. We keep track of all the students that moved through MTSS and how many went to an actual eval or ended up on an having an IEP service. Hours have decreased significantly. We've talked about improved teacher satisfaction, improved student engagement and participation. We also try to align what we're doing with the goals that this district has. Connecticut is investing in mental health initiatives for the schools. So increased inclusiveness can impact participation, and that translates to improved attendance, which is another initiative. We have a school-wide SEL programs, and a lot of the SEL, the social emotional learning programs align with many of our sensory-based programs. And then we have a goal for technology integration, like integrating that into, what students are already doing. And then we just really want to promote the visibility and communication of the OT role. So PD is a great way to do that, presenting for the PTO or parents, creating a PowerPoint presentation, just really highlighting the benefits to the whole school community. We really must continue to advocate for our profession. Recently, AOTA has expressed support for this model, and we're really hopeful that additional progress will follow as the work group presented a draft of the proposed workload model to the representative assembly at AOTA. So hopefully this will gain some more traction. Thank you. And just please remember, progress takes time. This could take 3 to 5 years to see any long-term outcomes. You really need to set realistic goals for yourself every year. We continue to do this, and as I mentioned before, we had a little bit of a setback. We inherited some students that were from an OT using a caseload model. So, what are we doing about that? Well, we've asked for meetings so that we can review and revise their IEPs. And then we're creating programs for these students, and then now we're using a push-in model of support versus pulling them out. And then you're going to want to develop an action plan that includes, determining what your next steps are going to be. Maybe you're going to identify just one tier 1 or tier 2 strategy to implement. Maybe even just draft a conversation to present to your admin. Reflecting on your workload tasks need acknowledgement, because we should not be taking all of our work home with us just because there isn't enough time allocated for us to complete the workload aspect of a caseload during our school day. Maybe try some interprofessional goal writing practices that align with what the student's doing in the classroom, and then you can push into the classroom or resource room or work with a smaller group. So action item 1, you're going to track all your work for a month. This is the workload calculator. Why? Because it builds awareness of what your true workload looks like, and then that creates the data so that you can have a discussion with your administrators and actually show them, look how much work I'm doing. I might be doing work of a time and a half person. So they really kind of need to see this in front of them so that they can actually get that perspective. Document everything you do. This is not an exhaustive list here. And if you go to Saruya and Garfinkel's website, you're going to see a more extensive list of the workload areas. And I've listed them at the end of this as well. Action item number 2, start with one building or grade level. Make it manageable, because this could be your test case for larger changes. So start in one school, focus in one classroom, integrate services or increase collaboration time, track the time spent and track student outcomes. Partner with a supportive administrator or teacher. This is something I did my first year with a kindergarten teacher, and now this teacher is just implementing strategies after she has seen the impact. And all the students are benefiting in her classroom. Action item 3, small scale MTSS participation. Why? Because it shows how OT supports all students and not just those with IEPs. So if you identify 1 or 2 classrooms or grade levels for tier 1 support, you could offer OT-led strategies or school-wide or class-wide interventions. We go in and we do all kinds of different things, fine motor warm-ups. We do some sensory-friendly classroom modifications. We love the core out the door. This is probably my 4th time saying that. Stephanie does this great lesson on spaghetti and meatballs with pom-poms and strings, to demonstrate spacing between words and letters and words. Many of our teachers use Go Noodle in their classrooms. They began to say to us, like, these kids are just more energetic and they're not even calm after. So we found out that the teachers were frequently selecting fast-paced dance routines where we saw that, some students were just watching passively, and then others were becoming overstimulated. So we recommended pairing those activities with calming self-regulation videos such as Go Noodle's Victorious deep breathing exercise. We also introduced the alternatives like core out the door, and other rhythmic activities designed to promote regulation and co-regulation. So our goal was to ensure that all students were participating in those movement activities and that we were able to provide maybe some accommodations for those who might have difficulty following along. And the last action item, you're going to analyze a few IEPs differently. Why? Well, because this is going to reshape how others view OT services. So for your next 3 to 5 evaluations, you could include recommendations on different types of service delivery options. Maybe you recommend more indirect versus direct services. Maybe you're front loading minutes, providing trimester check-ins. Sometimes students don't need a weekly or monthly direct service after you've set them up at the beginning of the year. You could try functional goals that are aligned with the classroom activities for push-in services. We want to stress that, the focus should be on access versus therapy minutes because this is the educational model. You could even use dosing tools such as the considerations for educationally relevant therapy. This is not how to definitively determine service delivery time. However, it can be used as a great tool to show the team and parents the reasoning behind moving a student to indirect services or discontinuing services and just providing accommodations or modifications. The visual is really helpful in making the decision a bit more clearer for the team. So, some key takeaways. We really need to share our knowledge, build relationships, and be a part of the whole school community. And that means we need to advocate for a workload model. We don't need to evaluate all students, who may not have a disability or deficit, but maybe they just have a lack of experience or exposure. So let's give them time. Going through MTSS provides that opportunities for us to do that. It also provides that intervention for us to be able to support all students. A workload model aligns with ESSA and the least restrictive environment. You're going to maybe talk with your administration about capacity building, because this really is the key to long-term success. Once you set up many of the systemic supports, you won't have to do that again. And who doesn't want more student participation and engagement? I think that aligns with every district schools. So let's share our scope of practice beyond handwriting, beyond sensory needs. We can impact so much more, and we need to show them that we can do that. So these are some of the resources I was talking about. These are the school-wide initiatives, and if everyone's so curious, I don't know, there's a picture of the core out the door right there if you can see it. So these are some of the ones we've started. It's not an exhaustive list either. We actually implement a lot of different initiatives. So some of them are listed here. I've listed some articles here that are great resources for you to maybe get started, great talking points with your administration. And then for neuroaffirming practice, I really encourage you to watch this TED Talk with Bryden Carlson Giving and Catherine McGinley. It's a little long, but it is really good. And these are the workload calculators that I was talking about. There's a fourth one at the bottom. I think it's cut off, but the ASHA one, the Speech and Hearing Association, is super, super good. It will document every single second of your day, and it is amazing. It's a little complicated and can look overwhelming. So if you don't want to start there, you could start with the first one. The sample OT workload calculator is actually the one that OT Schoolhouse has, and it'll let you know, like, how much work are you doing? Are you doing the work of one OT, or are you doing the work of 2 full-time OTs? And then the one that's cut off is the low-tech paper and pencil one that you'll find on the Saruya and Garfinkel website. So I'm really hoping that you can use these strategies. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I also have a lot of references with a lot of great resources, and everyone's going to get a copy of this PowerPoint after so that you can have those resources. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I already see some questions that came through, Dr. Bernardi. So how does this MTSS workload model impact billing to Medicaid? This is what makes our employment financially possible within the public school system. This would be hard to sell to administrators and bureaucracy.
Yeah, so we don't do a whole lot of Medicaid billing in our district, but I do have an article that talks about that. It's the one that Melissa Olson had done. She has a longer article that she did for her capstone. And I understand that there is that Medicaid billing process. You're still going to have a caseload. We're not eliminating a caseload altogether. We're just making it more possible for us to be able to make a wider impact, and we're keeping kids in the least restrictive environment. You know, that is a longer answer. If you would also like to contact me, I'm happy to discuss some of that with you as well. Yeah. Thank you for that question, though.
And what are the metrics or data points you were using to demonstrate the effectiveness of the workload model?
So we keep track of all of the MTSS, the kids who are going through. For our data for justifying the workload model, we did a time study. We did, you know, we looked at what we were doing, how many students were on, you know, our IEP, we're on IEPs that really didn't need to come out of the classroom. You know, there was a lot of pullout happening that didn't need to happen. And you can still bill, you know, for push-in services. Most of our students are push-in services, or they are on indirect services. But that also being in the classroom, working with that student, also the teacher and the para in your classroom or other staff are watching you, and you're modeling that behavior for them to also carry over the rest of the week, so the students are getting that bigger impact. So we keep data on every student that comes through MTSS and what happens, you know, how far do they get in the tiers, how many go to actual evaluation, how many end up on IEPs at the end of the year. And we show that data at the end of the year to our administrators. We need to, we have to write up our accomplishments every year, and we add that data into our accomplishments. Okay, I just started going off on a tangent. I hope I answered your question. I think I answered like several.
No problem.
Sorry.
No worries. And the last one I'm seeing that we have time for is, how do you envision the OT role continuing to expand within a systems-based framework like MTSS?
So I really envision, OTs can be leaders in schools, and there's no reason why we can't take on more of those leadership roles. And I feel as though the OT scope of practice is very narrow thinking right now, or in a lot of districts, and we want to show them how much more impact we can participate, help students participate in all areas, not just handwriting, not just fine motor, visual motor. I know those are the big ones, but we really want that MTSS process to also help us if determine who is really needing skilled OT services directly. Some of our students, and this has happened to me, where I've evaluated a student because of a teacher wanting to eval, or the IEP team, and within like a couple of months, the student is taking off and doing great. Now, I can't say that I'm that great of an OT that I did that. I'm thinking that maybe that student just needed exposure, needed some practice, and now he's on for 3 years, unless I do an eval before that, to determine that I can discontinue him. So it eliminates a lot of unnecessary evaluations, and then allows us to be able to do other things as part of part of your caseload. You do have workload model. You have to do a lot of workload activities. But we want to make that more manageable, and using the MTSS process can help you do that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Those are all fantastic questions. And Dr. Bernardi, thank you so much for presenting for us this evening. Like I said, I will
Thank
be
you.
following up on Friday morning with the PDF version of these slides so that you can access the links that Dr. Bernardi provided for you along with the recording. So thank you again, everyone, for attending this evening, and have a great night.